I realised very early on that a 9-to-5 desk job just wasn't going to be for me.
So it's nice to be able to be dealing with, things that are actually impacting people's day-to-day lives.
As long as you have a passion or an interest in property, I think anyone can enter it.
From houses and football stadiums to hospitals and skyscrapers like the Shard, real estate is involved in every aspect of our lives, where we live, where we work, where we relax, play and learn. Many different jobs exist in the property sector, but if you like the idea of working within property and working with people, one exciting option that you really should consider is becoming a surveyor. With me today, I have Alice Hirschman. She is a surveyor within the retail team at Cushman & Wakefield. I've also got Ross Ray. Ross is an acquisition surveyor for the big yellow storage company. And finally, we have Richard Lee, who is an investment surveyor at Allsop. We're just going to start really broad, guys. And Alice, I'm going to chuck this question at you. What is it that surveyors actually do?
So a surveyor is obviously a property professional, but the term surveyor is covered under a massive umbrella. There's lots of different types of surveyors. So you've got a commercial surveyor, which is obviously what we do, but there's also residential, quantity and building surveyors. And then obviously under the commercial umbrella, you've got lots of different types of surveyors again. So you've got valuation surveyors who value property, you've got investment, which is what Rich does, development, which is what Ross does, retail, which is what I do, and then you also got industrial, office and rating, to name a few. Surveyors also then work very closely with a range of other property professionals, such as, architects, town planners, property developers, banks, etc.
You talked about a range of different specialisms within surveying. So can you just elaborate more on your specific role at your company and what you actually do?
Yep. So I am a retail agent. So I basically, to put it simply, lease shops and shopping centres. So I work for landlords, basically leasing shops. So one of the main clients that I work for is Transport for London, which is obviously TfL, on the underground. So we lease all of their retail units on the underground, but they don't also own just property in underground. They also actually own a lot of property around London. So
TfL, Transport for London, they own a number of sites. So, for example, some of their train stations will have shopping units in them, and then your job is to go and act on their behalf to try and get clients, tenants like Zara or an independent news agent to want to lease out. And my understanding of a lease is essentially it's a long-term rental agreement. You're renting something for a long period of time. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, obviously, leases are shorter, but for TfL, they actually don't necessarily do it on a long-term lease. Their leases are, some of them are 12 months. It varies depending on really what the tenant wants. So, for example, TfL would come to us and say, we've got a retail unit in Bond Street Station. So then, obviously, what we would do is, obviously, you have to go and inspect it, measure it, do a report on it, a marketing report. And then what we would do is market the property. So you put together some marketing details, just like you'd get for a house.
Okay.
So it's similar to that. And then we, again, do similar to what estate agency. So you mail out the details around the retail market to lots of other retail agents who are acting for occupiers, and then essentially you just do viewings, receiving offers, and then it's for TfL we always have a deadline, and when the kind of offer for when offers close, the deadline for when you can make an offer, and then basically it's then down to TfL to make a decision as to which retailer they want to go with. Yeah.
And you presumably you give them professional guidance through that process, like what perhaps the best one would be.
Exactly. And you have to look at things like, whether they're a new business, whether they, have a look at what their financial background is. All of that kind of stuff has to be considered. And then obviously you have to think about tenant mix as well. So you probably wouldn't put, for example, we wouldn't put a Cafe Nero next to a Starbucks, for example.
I'm with you. Okay, thanks for that, Alice. Richard, do you mind telling us, my understanding is you're an investment surveyor, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Can you just tell us, tell us about that? What do you do in your day-to-day role?
Okay, so I advise clients on their commercial property portfolios. Essentially, that's as an investment agent, it's buying and selling of their assets. There's also a bit of asset management that's thrown in there as well.
And so, to be really clear, an asset is essentially a building because it has value, right?
Exactly, yeah.
What's the ultimate objective? What are you trying to achieve for them?
Well, trying to get returns. I mean, it really differs from client to client. I deal with pension funds, I deal with property companies, private investors, and they all have really specific investment requirements. So for pension funds, they want really secure investments, ultimately because they're looking after people's pension money. So at the moment, these are actually really important to ride out downturns in the market, which we're seeing at the moment with the current COVID-19 situation. But a supermarket, for instance, is one example. So supermarkets, everyone needs to go and buy food. They're seen as a blue chip covenant, as we would call it. So essentially, that's looking at their financials, and they've got a lot of money essentially, whereby they can cover their rent each year. They're not in doubt effectively. They also tend to take very long leases, so they would take one of their shops, for instance, for a minimum of 20 years, perhaps. So yeah, there's a bit more to it than that, but in basic terms, that's what a pension fund would they'd have some form of fund to invest in that type of asset. So
let me just break it down. So essentially, they want to own a supermarket because supermarkets are highly sought after, and they're going to have clients like Tesco, Waitrose, whatever. They're going to lease that for a long period of time. So they're pretty secure that they're always going to be getting their income from those tenants, right?
Exactly. I mean, we refer to it as a yield basis, but essentially that a yield is what rent you are getting over the duration of the lease. Now, your total return for something like a supermarket could well be 4% per annum. You can then go higher up the risk curve, and for instance, private investor may be willing to take a bit more of a risk because they're not investing on behalf of people's pensions. They're investing their own money, and they're prepared to take a bit more risk. So they may buy more opportunistically, where your yield is actually quite a lot higher, but there's a lot of risk associated with that, or there's more risk associated with that.
So it seems to me like there's a fair whack of responsibility on you there, because presumably they're making these decisions based on the advice you're giving them from your own knowledge, right?
That's right, yeah.
Ross, tell us about what you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm client side, whereas Rich and Alice are on the consultancy side. And very simply put, my job involves buying land for the development of self-storage units. And these units are then leased out to a mix of private individuals and business customers. Predominantly, we're focused in London because it follows dense population, and there's also a supply constraint in London as well. So that market works particularly well for us. And so what will happen is we'll buy a plot of land and develop a building which will be similar to a warehouse.
Yeah.
Install mezzanine floors and then compartmentalize the space.
Got it.
So there can be anything ranging from 15 square foot up to 200 square foot.
Yeah.
And then it's a kind of let out on a month by month basis, as you say, to private individuals where they might store furniture or anything that's not essential, but they want to retain. But that's only one side of the business. There's also we let out the space to businesses, so predominantly small companies and SMEs that are kind of inventory heavy. So the likes of eBay buyers, people that sell stuff online. So there's two strands really.
How on earth did you come to the decision that working in the property sector and actually becoming a surveyor was the route you wanted to pick? I think, Alice, can we go back to you? Can you just tell us why surveying? Talk to us about your school A-level choices, university choices. Can you just take us through that journey really quickly, please?
Yeah, okay. So actually, again, when I was at school, I didn't know anything about surveying. It was actually only when I went to have a look around universities that I started hearing about this real estate management course, and obviously didn't know anything about it. But I mean, I've got some family that, well, my uncle is a property developer, so the only reason why I knew about it was through him. But it was actually when I went to look around Oxford Brookes and I started speaking to the tutor on the course that was really why I chose it, because if you do a course in real estate, you've got kind of an end goal is to become a surveyor, whereas some of these other courses that you do at university, like, I don't know, maths or whatever, yeah, you don't have an end goal really in sight, whereas we knew exactly what we were going into the whole way through university, which was really attractive to me because I kind of knew where I wanted to get to. And then the reason why I chose to be a retail surveyor is obviously because, you know, retail, I'm a girl, I like shops and, you know, new brands and everything, and that's kind of why the retail route really interested me from the beginning.
Yeah, so I grew up, my dad was in the profession, and so naturally I was exposed to it at home. During summer holidays at school, I'd go into his office, and I was, I guess, in that environment in between my school years. So it was just off the back of that, really. I was interested in it. I've wanted to learn more about it. It seemed like a very sociable industry. Everyone that I was meeting, of his colleagues, his friends that were in there, got along with them really well, and it just seemed like something that was quite appealing and something that perhaps I wanted to do when I was older.
It seems to me that when you're 18 and you're picking that, you're pretty certain that is the field you want to work in, right?
Yeah, I think, just going and doing the degree, you don't necessarily know what area of property it is that you want to go into, but the industry as a whole interested me, and that was the route for me into it.
So very early on, I knew I wanted to go into property. It's slightly different from Rich and Alice, and the main thing that attracted me was seeing like a new shop open up or a building go up, and know that had happened as a direct result of a work or an idea that you had. That was something that I found quite appealing. So that was the main basis as why I kind of chose property as an industry. And then, as you say, you go into university not knowing exactly what you're going to specialise in, and that kind of comes out as part of the process.
The actual routes into becoming a surveyor, Rich, can you just expand on that?
Yeah, so I'll start with the common route, which I guess is finishing school, then going on to some form of property degree. So I went to Oxford Brookes and did the real estate management course. That was 3-year undergraduate course. Then once I'd finished that, it was then a case of applying for jobs, which happens at a certain time. I then got offered a job at Allsop, which was on the graduate scheme, which it differs from firm to firm, as I'm sure Alice and Ross will touch on, but certainly at Allsop it's a 2-year process until you get chartered. And for me, that involved 4 6-month rotations. So there's this APC, which essentially at the end of those 2 years you get examined, and then once you pass that, you then get qualified as a chartered surveyor. But for me, those 4 rotations that I did within the company, we've got a commercial auction team, which I did a 6-month stint in, a receivership team, which is essentially where banks take charge of properties, and then we had to advise them as to what to do with them. I did a 6-month stint with them. I did a 6-month stint with our city office leasing team. So I was letting office space in the City of London. And then finally, I did a seat with our residential valuation team. So we were valuing prime central London residential. And then at the end of that, I had the APC, which involves a big bit of coursework and then also an interview.
The big players, Allsop, Cushman & Wakefield. Who are the other big players that people should be aware of if they don't know about them at the moment?
Savills, CBRE, JLL, Colliers. Yeah, there's lots of firms that offer these graduate schemes. Tons.
And apprenticeships, those are an option as well to becoming a surveyor.
Yeah, certainly at Allsop we're taking on apprentices straight out of school. You touched on it. They may not have got the results, they may not have the money to go to university, or they may not even want to go to university, but they want to get involved in a specific industry, in this case property. And we're seeing really great results. These people that are coming to us, because ultimately they are learning on the job. They don't necessarily have to do, they will do the rotations, but for the first couple of years they're in a job. They're getting paid. They're getting their qualifications as well. That's one route for people, and it's paid for by the company.
I probably say it's a really good way to do it, because when you're at university, you don't. I was going to touch on it later, but the experience you get from being in a firm when you're doing work experience is really good, because when you're at uni, until you put it into practice, it doesn't all necessarily make sense. So the apprenticeship scheme is really good for that.
I'm with you. And then just to clarify what Richard was saying, I think it's interesting. You don't have to do a property degree. You can do a general degree in anything: geography, history, I presume, biology, and then actually just maybe through doing work experience, and we'll get onto this in a second.
Yeah.
Then go and do like postgraduate studies in property.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say, if you think that you are interested in real estate, then it's probably worth doing work experience, because there's no point going to uni and doing a degree in maths, and then, obviously it will help, but you're just kind of delaying, sure, doing what you need to do. So I'd recommend getting as much work experience as you can, to understand whether you think you'd like to do it. Then doing the real estate course.
We're here now. Let's talk about work experience. So what are the best ways of going about getting work experience? And we'll start off at Alice, and the other two chip in as you see fit.
So at Cushman & Wakefield, we have a summer internship, which is basically you just apply online, I think it is. And then I think actually you do have to have an interview, but it's a 6-week internship. So, you're there at the company for 6 weeks. I think you're in one department, so you kind of can get really stuck in. And once you've done that internship, all you have to do is do one presentation, and then you're pretty much, it's a kind of fast track to the graduate scheme.
Okay. But I think if you're at school, there are opportunities out there, and perhaps on the first instance it's best to speak to parents who may have friends that work in the industry, and that would be a good route in. Alternatively, you could just send messages to the right people, go on companies' websites, for instance, just reach out that way. You may get a day or 2 days, for instance. Just in the summer holidays, it tends to be quite a accommodating industry, because things are a little bit quieter, just with the school holidays, people are going away, etc. So we can actually get people in and just give them a couple of days and give them a bit of an insight as to what the industry is like.
That's brilliant. I think that's really good advice. I think LinkedIn is a good platform to find out the names of people perhaps that you might want to reach out to.
Definitely.
What is it about being a surveyor that you really enjoy doing and you like? So I think, Ross, let's start with you on this question. What is it about being a surveyor that you really like?
Yeah, I think the main thing, I realised very early on that a 9-to-5 desk job just wasn't going to be for me. And the thing with surveying is that no day's the same. It's really diverse, as we've touched upon before. I think there's a number of personalities that suit property, and there's a number of things that you can go into that best suit what you're interested in. And it's just no day's the same. It's varied work, and yeah, I think it's something that I've looked back on, and you know, pleased that I've chosen it as a profession.
Nice. And so really quickly, you say no day's the same. Like, how often are you at your desk? What does your day-to-day life look like? Like, what's your average day? Are you at the desk a lot? Are you out and about? Tell us about that quickly.
So I think we said before that when I started my career as at Colliers International, I was working as an industrial occupier, and that would be kind of, I would say 30% of the time I was out meeting businesses, understanding kind of what they needed to support, what type of real estate they need to support their business, and yeah, so 30% out of the office, 70% in the office. And now I'm at Big Yellow. It's kind of the same. I would say it's probably highly weighted in being out of the office and looking at land and sites and assessing new opportunities for the business. You're constantly looking at new development sites, new opportunities, applying ideas you have to those sites. And it's as I say, it's quite diverse and creative, and it's that's what really attracts me to the job.
There's you know, a lot of freedom to, you know, you're given a lot of responsibility early on. It is very sociable, and ultimately you're dealing with something that's tangible. You know, you see it, as you said earlier, it's all around us. So it's nice to be able to be dealing with, you know, things that are actually impacting people's day-to-day lives and hopefully helping to try and improve those.
All jobs have their, you know, perhaps their sides that aren't so enjoyable. And I just wondered if you can touch on anything that you find that you would like to have known beforehand. Might not necessarily be a deal breaker, but some of the challenges in your roles. So are you able to answer that? Alice, we'll go to you for that. Can't slate your boss.
I actually probably,
I love my boss.
I wouldn't say that I don't really have any frustrations, to be honest. I can't think of an answer.
No,
to
fair
that,
enough. Any of you,
which is a good thing. That's a good thing.
Definitely, absolutely.
A slight twist on the question. Something that I sort of goes back to what we were discussing earlier, and I was going to say, but something that I really wanted to touch upon is that if I'd known about the practical experience beforehand, I would have definitely have taken that up. And I think it's actually essential having some practical experience before going into property. And I would recommend it to anyone that's seriously thinking about entering the industry, because sometimes learning from a book is great, but actually in property, applying it to in a practical sense, I think is really valuable.
What skills do you need to have to be successful as a surveyor? To be, you know, to be in surveying, to get into it, what skills do you need to possess? And this can be both, you know, hard skills and soft skills, you know, communication skills, people skills. Can you just tell us about that? Who wants to have a go at that one?
Rich?
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, but I guess people skills, as I touched on just a minute ago, I think it is a very you know, people orientated industry. So long as you are capable of getting along with people, you know, you very much learn on the job. So long as you're quite, you know, willing to learn and you know, determined and enthusiastic, you can definitely learn a hell of a lot quite quickly. And just having a positive attitude towards it.
Final pieces of advice that you'd give to students and anyone who's interested in maybe joining the property industry and becoming surveyors. What is your final piece of advice? Richard.
Yeah, the work experience is a huge thing, because you just getting to experience what it's like on a day-to-day basis working in the industry. But other than that, I guess it's doing research, looking at the various different courses at the various different universities. I think we've touched on it, but Oxford Brookes was where I certainly studied. There's Reading University, University of West England in Bristol, Cambridge University. So I guess it's just doing some more research into the next step once you've left school, and how you can start your pathway down into the property industry.
Love it. Alice, anything from you? Any final piece of advice to students?
No, I'd 100% just say get as much work experience as you can with as many different companies as you can. That's really important.
Nice. And Ross, final thoughts from yourself?
I think I'd say that there's not one size fits all in terms of personality traits. So don't ever rule yourself out from the industry. As long as you have a passion or an interest in property, I think anyone can enter it, as we kind of touched on before. And also going back to the work experience side of things, the big companies will have set process where you have to apply, but everyone in the property industry is pretty approachable. So just sending emails into directors of smaller firms, just asking if you can shadow a surveyor, I think that's a really good idea, and actually it shows some initiative and that you're actually interested in the sector. In terms of research, there's a lot of good tools out there. There's podcasts. I think Property Week and States Gazette do podcasts and Savills that you can listen to and understand a bit more about the sector, which I think is vital when you're looking to go down the graduate route.
And also, if you're interested in what the content is being, what's being discussed, that's a good sign, right? That perhaps
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Alice Hirschman, Richard Lee, Ross Ray, thanks so much for your time. And I think we'll leave it there. So thanks very much, team.
Thanks, James.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.